before that, with the Renaissance, there was an affinity between God and mathematics, right? But in the Baroque, after the Counter Reformation, the light becomes the metaphor for the divinity. And it's interesting because during the Renaissance, the mathematics is representative of the greatness, of the genius of God, right? And the mathematical rules that can be used to interpret and read describe the universe, right? That's why mathematics is an affinity with the divinity during the Renaissance. It's because the universe can be explained with mathematics. Therefore, it has a divine, quality. But during the Baroque, everything changes in the sense that the divinity is not something that can be measured, right? Pretty much like the light at the time. So Newton soon after, a few decades later, will come up with his own theories on light and light theory, etc. But at this point, the light is still a mystery that cannot really be measured, and pretty much like the divinity, meaning if you can measure the divinity, it means that divinity is finite. But if you cannot measure the divinity, it means that divinity is infinite, right? So the light for the Baroque becomes something that cannot be really measured. And this is an idea that appeals greatly to the Counter Reformation because rationality, or reading the Bible, right? Interpreting the Bible, which is basically rationality, is what started the Counter Reformation. The Reformation. So then Counter Reformation said, no, don't measure God, because then if you measure God, then people will argue about it. So we don't want people to argue about it. We want people to listen. So the light is a perfect symbol of God in this period, in the historical period. Right? Something cannot be measured. Something cannot be rationalized, therefore explained. Mystery of the faith, right? As they say in a Catholic Mass. Okay, so we are carving it out, right? Little by little, right? We are expanding the tonal scale, right? And all these things were kind of somehow more or less theorized in the Council of Trent, right? So the Council of Trent is the answer of the Catholic Church to the Reformation. And the Council of Trent is not just one event. It's in many events in the course of about 50, 60 years, right? And during these 50, 60 years, the Church codifies culture, codifies society according to new rules to counteract the Reformation. So in these guidelines that the clergy would prepare, right, as a new rule for society, but also what painters should paint and how they should paint it. Because as you can imagine, Catholic religion, art is a big part of a manifestation of faith, if not propaganda, right? In fact, propaganda was invented in this period by the Jesuits. Propaganda means to propagate, propaganda fide, right? To propagate the faith. So now we kind of keep going. See what I'm doing? Kind of blocking the values, right? More carefully now, but always trying to avoid outline, right? Outline like we did previously with the Greuze head, right? Try to, or other line drawing that we did, try to block in areas of values. And what will define a value is not going to be a line, it's going to be the value that next to it. What will define a form, right? It's an area that's next to it. All right, so now let's see. If I look at the corner of the mouth, I bring it up, and I see this. It's difficult to block in to identify this corner of the mouth. I bring it up, and I see that it cuts at the level more or less of the side of the iris, right? So the iris is here, get more or less the side of the iris, so that's good. This casing here, this is here, I bring it up, it gets more or less at the level of the lacrimal caruncle, a little bit more in, right? And just a little bit past the width of the nose. So this is too wide. Now I notice this. It's a little bit too wide. So I need to narrow it a little bit here, right? And the corner of the mouth is just past the nostril here, the wing of the nose here. And it goes up to the sclera a little bit. Okay, so it should be more or less here, right? Like that, here, like this. So now in here, even if you see this line, but what you don't want to do, you don't want to do a line that is even like this, right? What you want to do is, doesn't matter how thin it is, you treat it as an area of value, like that, right? An area of value. So this is an area of value, right? Which what it does is not even. This is an even line, so that's a line, right? But this is an area of value, and the area of value has, starts maybe darker on one corner here, widens up a little bit, and gets narrower here, darker here, and then gets thin like that. So that is not a line, even if it's thin, it's an area of value. So now you want always to keep in mind area of values, not lines, right? The eraser here. Now we start getting this facial expression, this slightly lifted eyebrow, right? So this is also the period of Descartes, right? The Cartesian theory, Descartes, that is one of the scientists that he also tried to codify soul. He described 64 types of souls, which is interesting, right? Codifying the soul is an interesting scientific endeavor. But this idea of finding the site of the soul and codifying it is not new. Leonardo was doing the same thing. Leonardo was trying, in the Middle Ages, they were trying to find the site of the soul. What is the soul physically, right? Which is really interesting endeavor. So in the case of Descartes, he was saying that the site of the soul is at the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is at the base of the hypothesis. Sorry. It's at the base of the skull. And the base of the skull is in line with the eyes. So Descartes was saying that because the site of the soul is, the eyes are so close and in line with the site of the soul or of the hypothesis, then that's where you see the motus, the mood more clearly, because that's where the soul manifests itself, right? So now, the soul as the eyes at the window of the soul is not new. It's being described, it's been mentioned many times by various authors, like Shakespeare and Leonardo is in the Bible, etc., etc. But every historical period, trying to give it its spin, right? So in the case of Descartes, he was saying, using a pseudoscientific approach, saying, well, because the soul is in the pineal gland, the eyes being the closest to the pineal gland, then we can see the manifestation of the soul, right, through the eyes. So in this working here, you can see how these facial expressions are just barely hinted at. They are not really super visible, like in the King of Naples, right? Because the King of Naples is the picture of the King of Naples is so much stronger in emotion because it's a different historical period. It belonged, even though it was made, this is the King of Naples, right? Even though it was made during the right, 1480, 1485, it still considered late Gothic because of the realism, the naturalism. So this was naturalism, right? But this is not naturalism anymore. This is there's an intervention on the facial expression that are somehow tamed and distilled and rendered essential. And you don't have all those wrinkles. We have a way of evoking the emotions that is idealized. And that gives it that I don't know, let me put it on a different plane, right? So when we see these facial expressions are so soft, so evoked, but essentially evoked, right? Because this is a very essential facial expression. I mean, you gotta give it to these guys. They were really dedicated to achieving a specific. This didn't happen by chance. They were really going after the specific result of synthesizing or finding the essence of a mood, right, and evoking it without making it too realistic. Because if you make it too realistic, then it's not universal. Makes sense, right? So if it's in its essence, then it can refer to everybody. It can refer to you, to me, and you can identify with that. But this is the King of Naples, right? That's him, right? This is a person. That's a universal mood, so it becomes much more relatable, right? So now the upper lip needs to be lifted a little bit more, right? I'm going to lift it a little bit more here. What I was saying before, sometimes you darken a value by lightening what is next to it, or vice versa. So in this case in here, that can be intentional or non-intentional, right? In this case in here, I need to lighten this up, right? But as I do so, as I lighten this up, that will appear darker, too dark, right? So now I had to intervene on that too, and soften up this dark area here, which is now too dark. It was okay before, because this was lighter, right? I mean, this was darker, so it was okay before. But now, by contrast with this, that looks too dark. So now I had to lift it a little bit. So I'm going to go over it with an even motion, right? Here, careful in this area here, because it's a little bit darker. But yeah, I need to lift it a little bit more here like this, right? And I need to go up here next to the wing of the nose here, right? So I'm having a hard time because when I look at the drawing here, the value looks good. But when I look at the value in my screen is much lighter. And I think it's a problem with the transmission, it's a bit where the highlight looks brighter on the screen than they are in real life. So I had to kind of adapt to what I see on the screen, right? I don't know if you had the same problem. Actually, you don't see your work on the screen, so you don't. So same thing in here. See that as now I kind of lighten this up, that will start looking too dark. So I need to kind of soften this up too, right? And pretty soon, I would say we can start working with the pencil. The white pencil, right? Because there are areas where I cannot lift the highlight anymore, and I would need to. I need to do so. So all of this is lighter now, right? All of this needs to be lifted a little bit. This we need to work on this, the mouth here. This here, right? Coming down like this, the chin, right? Work on the chin a bit. So when you work on the chin, blocking first the big halo, the whole halo of light mass, and then go back there on the highlight on the second moment. So we're blocking first the whole pattern, right? That is not the brightest highlight here, right? But our highlight is the almost the brightest, but not quite the brightest at this point. Find that pattern, and then later we go back here like this and carve out the chin, the round volume of the chin here like this, right? Under here we have all these nice, interesting reflected light, and for now we can leave it like this. It looks like the right value, right? But we might need to develop this further. So you see how gradually we kind of really dig it out more and more, right? More and more dig out the facial features. That probably needs to be darker, right? So we go back in with the charcoal, right? How do you find this, guys? Is it particularly difficult? It's trickier than the other one. You're having some problem in figuring this out, or you're doing okay?
I think I'm on my fourth mouth if I fifth.
And they're really difficult, right? They're really difficult. That's what I'm saying. It's the subtlety. I mean, I'm struggling because the subtlety, not just of the mouth, it's the light. It's the light. But that's why I wanted to do this, because what I was saying, I saw that you guys got the proportion. You guys got the facial feature positioning. It's the tonal passage from one value to another that is very tricky. So this one is give you that. You practice with this, even if you don't get it right, that's fine. But the practice of doing this makes you really extend the tonal scale. But you see also why is it so difficult to capture that mouth? It's the light. If you look at this kind of various areas here, it's not the outline of the lips. It's the light that kind of messes with the form. The light kind of recreate abstract patterns that around the mouth, etc., that are almost unpredictable. So I would say it's a good exercise, but eventually we'll get it. Right? So I want to frame this portion in here, central portion, because this is a darker area that goes in between the light mass and the reflected light. So I really want to work on this a little bit more to create a sense of peak, because that would be the peak of the form here. It goes right through the center of the face, clearly. So that would help in getting the right sense of volume, right? Sense of volume of the face. So this area here, see how this area here, that's very hard. The subtlety of the passage from one edge to an area value to another area value. It's really the edge, how soft that is. It cannot be too sharp. So if you squint and you see your edge kind of popping out like a pattern, like a triangular pattern or a bar, whereas you don't see it there. I kind of saw how soft it is, right? If I squint, I see that this area here is a little bit too flat in my drawing and too sharp. In there, it's so subtle. So I need to kind of soften up that little bit area of highlight here, right? Or lighter value, right? And here now it comes down, following this pattern of shadow here on the forehead here, right? It goes down along the eye here, the upper portion of the orbit here, like this. And then here, around the eye with the zygomatic bone, right here. And so basically it follows this, see that, all this pattern here. We need to push this back, right? And then we'll start, so having this area here, right? Or this line here of shadow mask with a kind of a core shadow really helps in framing the side plane. Also, probably we need to do is here block in the hair, because the hair is very dark here, right? And that helps me also in framing the face, which now is kind of open here, right? So I'm gonna take a break from the face because sometimes you just need to take a break from a subject and then move on to something else, because for a few minutes, otherwise we enter in obsession land, right? But you see what I was saying about treating the hair as volume rather than the individual strand, right? So in here, think of, that's another reason why I want to do this, because in here, this is how you would draw the hair, your hair. Even if this is a sculpture, that's fine. But when you draw your hair, you block in this big locks of hair first, right? Here, big lock of hair first. And then gradually carve out the highlight, midlight, and all these things, and then eventually a single strand. But the single strand of hair is the last thing you do. Soften it up a little bit, and then eventually I'm gonna lift with a eraser, right? Okay, so let's try to block in a little bit of the eyes, right? A little bit of the eye to see if we can get into the expression. You want to pay attention, you do this again. It's never a sharp line, right? Never a sharp line. It's an area of value. And keep it soft, just to mark it first, to see if you can, just a thin line, a thin marking is sufficient to see if the eye is positioned properly, right? So what you need to pay attention to, look how much space you have here from the iris to the side of the eye, this negative shape in here. See this negative shape in here, right? See how big that is, and you see how the lower portion of the eyelid goes down like this, short and long, up here to the corner, right? And we have some highlight, right? So the dark area, the dark value here is on the sclera, right? And the light area here is the section of the lower eyelid. So I need to now define the lower eyelid with the value, right, which is the lighter value of the section of the eyelid, right? Oh, wow, it's coming in. Yeah, the wind blowing, scary. And then we have the lacrimal caruncle, right? Good here, we got it right here. The lacrimal caruncle light is a little bit lighter, right? A little bit lighter here. So I need to go back in this eye, kind of take away that sharp edge, and then lifting a little bit of the highlight. So again, you see how it's, as you get in the small detail, it's always the same thing. Get always the value. Try to block in the value, not the line, right? Okay, so this lower eyelid, right? Maybe her eye is bigger than mine, so I need to move this eyelid here. I move it that way, right? So when we get into more details, then smaller and more value, that's gonna be, everything's gonna slow down. But overall, we want to have now block in a general assessment, right, of the main value, the main planes of the face, of the head. And when that is established, then it's easier to develop the finer details. Okay, just a little bit wider, right? You're gonna get to at the end, where the very end, where you have a few sharp lines, but they're very short, right? They're very short, and they're not really outlining, framing, let's say, the eyelids or the lips, etc. They're just sharp areas of maybe a fold in the skin, etc., right? A little more than that. Like here, right, on the side of the head here, you're gonna have a sharp line here, but it's just sharp on the side here, and not even so, it's not super sharp, because if you look at the edge, it's really kind of have a kind of soft margin, and the edge in here is really important that you kind of create a softer margin even when it's very high contrast in there, because that soft margin will make the form turn like that. If you have a white that stops abruptly with a very super sharp white light, then what happens is it creates a sharp edge, and you don't want a sharp edge, right? Because it's round, right? It's a face. So let's take just a second to see the hair, right? So now I have the hair, I have 3 or 4 values in here. So what I could do, I could block in a few areas of slightly darker value here, right here, let's say here, and then here, all the way down here, like this, right? Because the form kind of goes in and out and in like that, right? And then also this way, right? So this way, so that happens. I had to kind of hint at that wavy hair, right? At the wavy form, overall form of the hair. After that, what I can do, can go back in with the eraser, and then kind of quickly carve out a few hair here and there, right? But not without being too regular and predictable. Always thinking the brightest highlight of the hair will be at the peak of the form, and now I'm going to start carving out these sharpened lines right here. For example, this is very sharp, but only here, right? Only here, and then here is a little bit lighter here, like this, right? And then turns here, lighter here overall, lighter here, but not super bright here, not super light here, right? And then maybe I need to now push this value here, push this value here. So guys, did you all get the recordings of the previous lessons? So you can watch them for another month, right, after today. So if you want to keep practicing any of the technique we have seen so far, you can watch the video again and then practice it more, right?